I guess I could blur the background or something. So
I mean, that's up to you. We're live now. They already see it. It's already there. No, I'm kidding.
No. Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our T3N discussion. I'm going to lower my voice. There's something. I still feel like my mic is being super sensitive right now for no reason.
Maybe I can check.
you seem to be coming through fine to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think it's
If I'm not
working fine.
spiking, then it's fine. It looks like I'm spiking on my audio mixer. It's at the max point, and I'm like, I don't
I think it's fine.
I don't know enough about this technical stuff. It's fine.
Yeah. This week's topic is Marshall versus caster design in tabletop RPGs.
Right.
We have, of course, recurring guest Jeff, also known as Big Campaign GM. Like you all know his booming voice, but we got a new face today, the Eternal GM.
How y'all doing, everyone?
Want to tell us a bit about yourself?
I've been a game master for over 10 years, never really got into playing, so my perspective pretty much is entirely going to be from the game master and game designer side. I've been working on my own system for 20 years and been kind of out of talking about it online until very recently. Been to myself, so y'all have never seen me before anywhere.
Okay.
20 years, that's quite some time. Hopefully that
Yeah,
comes with a lot
when
of
you have
experience.
no one to help you and you go, wow, this is going to be easy when you're like 13. I'm going to make my own game.
Right.
And 5 years later, you learn, oh, wait, I'm not inventing tabletop games. This has been a thing since the 70s. Let me look at everything on this shelf. So that's where I came across Chainmail, Pathfinder, D&D, Shadowrun, Vampire, just... Yeah, went from I'm inventing this to there's a lot of them already.
Yeah, I also tried to develop my own system before I had any experience with already existing ones. I was like, I'm not paying $50 for this book. I'll do it myself. And yes, I totally agree with you. That is a mistake.
That's what's taken it 20 years. Like I see all these people right now because of the OGL situation going, oh yeah, we're gonna make a system. We just started. I'm like, okay, we'll see you in 5 years.
Right.
We'll see where you are. Are you even still working on it?
Yeah. You need a lot of passion, determination, and even if you take breaks, you gotta get back into the project.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think let's try to pivot back again to the topic of the stream.
I'm going to look at Jeff and be like, well, you're the one who asked for this. Obviously you have to have questions already ready.
Oh, sure.
Or we can just go in and just... Because at least us three... Because Eternal GM has their own thing. Blaze has his own thing. I have my own things. So we could also just talk about our interactions, I guess. But
yeah, I think that's perfect. I'm glad that Eternal has as well, because this opens up that idea, right? I know a bit more about, of course, obviously Blaze's system, Ishkanekon, as well as Nova Archaic, as I've read through both of those. So to, I guess, start this, I think we can all agree to some extent in the standard, like D&D, Pathfinder, like the big ones, there is a martial caster divide, right? There's a way that, for whatever reason, I can only speak from like an America-centric viewpoint on this, that there's a fetishization a little bit over intelligence, and so people that wield magic and casting stuff get to have a lot more options and power than your blue-collar fighters and barbarians, and right? They're kind of left behind. Fighter dumb is, the common trope. I would like to start with, Ishkanekon, how do you address that in your system of kind of making those two play styles kind of feel very compatible without one person sitting there going like, okay, cool, they're going to stop time. I'll go chop firewood.
Yeah, I think the main question is, what is the core difference between marshals and casters? Since my system is more modular, it's also like the difference isn't as cut clear as with some other systems, like of course D&D, Pathfinder. I think like the core philosophy difference between the typical martial character and the typical caster is the idea about endurance versus potential. So you have the classical fighter. He doesn't rely as much on resources. He can just keep on doing his reliable source attacks all day, and he also has more hit points, better defenses, so he can take hits far better without having to compensate in some way, like with spells and such. But with the caster, he has his limited resources and such, but he can achieve great things, mighty spells that deal a lot of damage, or magical tricks that can help him in specific situations. But he's rather vulnerable. Low vitality or hit points, or however you call it in your system. And to keep up in defenses, they have to invest their limited resources. In D&D, for example, with the shield spell, or maybe, if you're more of a cleric type, healing yourself, or I forgot the name of the spell that gives you extra armor class.
Mage armor?
I wasn't thinking about mage armor. I was talking about the cleric spell that gives you like +2 to AC. But that's not important right now. The fact is they have to invest their resources, which tend to be in question, in quotation marks, more limited than the fighter to reach the same defensive potential, or at least temporarily even surpass it.
Okay.
And yes, in Ishanekon World Shapers, I like the archetypes which tend to be more towards martial characters. They embody that idea of endurance. First of all, they get far more vitality. They can take way more. They also have a tendency to get better armor, or at least higher armor classes, which do have a slight numerical advantage if you ignore the weight value. Over the lighter armor options, and therefore tend to be able to take more hits. Sub-archetypes of the two archetypes, which fully go martial, bulwark, and war, also always tend to give you defensive options while leveling up. There are only very few. Actually, the bulwark feature automatically gives you a boost to either armor, evasion, or both. And with the war, there are only very few subclasses that just flat out do not get some form of defensive boost while leveling up.
Okay,
but on the other hand, yeah.
Oh, so I was going to say, so in a more modular system like what you're designing, do you feel that that gap is reduced? Like, it sounds like, besides the statistic part, right, hit points, armor class, what the tricks and what you can do as a martial versus what you can do as a caster stays somewhat in line with that kind of power levels to that?
Yes, you're right that in my system they're definitely closer to each other. And if you level correctly, you can actually subvert that typical. You could, for example, take negative traits for a war archetype, which reduces your vitality, but boost up your willpower and ability that you learn. And therefore, be a glass cannon which still fights with a weapon. That's also one of the paths. For those who don't know, in my system, you can choose one path which helps you to boost like the core mechanic you build around. For martial characters, the default is Path of Attacks, which gets you, when you level up, more attacks or stronger attacks. But there's a Path of Maneuver, which like you don't get more attacks, but you get a free maneuver attack that you can. Maneuver abilities are abilities you can use with your weapons, and you get one for free. And the damage of all your maneuver abilities is significantly boosted. So you play more like an ability user, which just uses their ability with their weapon. So my system does actually gives you a lot of tools to remove yourself from really the archetypical martial character and also the archetypical caster character, right?
Okay.
And in one of my campaigns, for example, I'm playing Sage, which, okay, unarmed archetype is hybrid, not caster. But the Sage archetype, sub-archetype, is supposed to push you towards the caster part. But I just pumped him up with all sorts of defensive abilities, making him sort of an earthbender type. And therefore he's highly defensive, has quite the endurance, and also relies for his default damage, with his spare fist. So basically weapons.
Okay.
So yes, my system does has a lot of flexibility, definitely.
All right.
Mm.
Eternal, kind of the same thing. I guess with what you've been designing over the last 2 decades, I'm sure there's quite a lot that you've learned, especially when you're saying, "Hey, I don't have to reinvent the wheel." How does this wheel look?
So technically the biggest lesson I've learned is I think most people when they're designing a system actually make the flaw of trying to put all classes or types, groupings if you will, in at once. Right now the D20 core systems playtest just has marshals and technicians. And right now, you can look at our system where we have the reaction and trigger system. So if I'm running across the field and the city guard has 6 archers, each one of those archers just got a reaction attack opportunity on the person running. So by adding these reactions in, giving more towards of them towards marshals, by giving marshals extra movement speed, I create a whole system called ability die. For it, which you will actually spend a die and have a roll system form. This will be for like counter attack. 3.5's little, if you hit an enemy, kill them, you can put the rest of the damage on an enemy nearby. They're things that all marshals should be able to do. Well, I did this with technicians, mages, and mystics. So what this did was it separated everything. So I'm able to focus on making the system function for technicians and marshals. Then decide, how do I want mages to interact damage-wise and mechanic-wise in comparison to what already functions? So by separating magic out, I've been able to really make marshals a lot more complete. They don't just feel like someone that's going to attack, and that's all they've got. There's a whole lot of extra strategic options. Like, with extra reactions, you might prepare an item, get behind cover, raise your shield, assist somebody, interfere with someone attacking your ally. There's a lot of stuff that's just straight martial that's now all them. So to create the martial balance, I designed the game around martials. And so
Excellent.
when a mage comes in and goes, well, fireball. Well, if the marshal at that level, when you get fireball, is doing 5d6 worth of damage, maybe the mage's spell should do 3d6, but it covers a large area, so it could end up doing 15, 20d6 worth of damage. It makes every action a mage does have to be strategized, planned out, and also have your marshals making sure you're not going to have someone run up on you. So it builds the game around the functions of what these classes are in reference to fantasy. Instead of just trying to go, well, marshals need to attack, but let's make cool spells. Let's make these things function without magic. And then find where magic fits into this. And that was the biggest lesson I've learned over 20 years when designing a system with marshals to mages.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like that. I agree with that. Sorry,
Yeah,
Blaze.
that is a very interesting approach, especially you're thinking, okay, martials are more reactive, which makes sense. So when you think about magic, it's more like I'm charging up my spell, concentrating, fighting. It's not something you can just quickly shoot out unless maybe you're really specialized in that. But like a weapon, you especially if a sword, you can just quickly react, parry, move it, and such. And also something that I think is very important, that trap of making martials boring is very tempting, make them just attack. And I think that's the biggest hurdle you have to overcome to make sure that they do not just attack. They need to have tactical options.
Hmm. And see, with designing your system, actually using resources like stamina and mana, you can actually benefit marshals really, really well. Like, so instead of going, hey, you've reached level 15, you get an extra attack, go, hey, your marshal grouping has gotten to level 10. Your basic attack now doesn't take 2 seconds, it takes 1. For note, our system works in 3-second rounds. So as you're going up, you'll have two attacks you can do per round. But that's only 2 seconds. You technically have 3. You can spend an extra stamina to use that third attack. You could use an extra stamina to move 2 more hexes of movement. So you're able to spend stamina to keep doing more and more as a marshal. Use the ability die to do more, and you have moves that allow you to exchange these resources to kind of juggle them as a marshal. For the mages, I've always been tired of people going, magic is extremely complicated and hard to learn, yet it's mechanically done the way it is. I have it built in to where the same training system that works off of your tools, skills, also works for spells. So when you first get a spell and you start using it, it's not trained. Once it's trained, you're adding your modifier in. Then it can go up to mastery. This makes it to where you have to train each and individual spell, as well as basically look at all magic as being wild magic now. You have a chance for it to go chaotic. You have a chance to lose control of this extremely complicated stuff. So now that that's built in, it kind of tones mages down while we've jacked marshals up. And so far, it seems a lot better than anything we've seen.
All right. Yeah, I can agree. I like the idea of that. So, Kyle, tell us about then Novarchaic and how do you address, or how does the system function between those two archetypes?
So, what's ironic is, like, I'm kind of in a very similar space as both of these with Novarchaic, right? In the sense that I've kind of, the way that I've been looking at it is sort of the trade-offs and benefits of the situations. Of course, Novarchaic is a modern-day game, so Martial kind of bleeds more into ranged combat more than actually using martial stuff. Now, then again, there are builds to, do Kung Fu, so that's arguable anyways. But, to kind of like guide the things that I wanted to say, I'm going to, one of the main problems that we can all agree on for martial versus casters is progression, right? It is, in a leveled system, any system with a level, casters grow at a faster rate because they get more options. These options are normally quadratic powerful, right? Because, like, 1 second level spell in the dragon game is supposed to be as powerful as 2 first level spells. That's how they did their design, right? 3 is supposed to be even more so. It's actually supposed to be as powerful as 2 second, if I remember right. And it's just kind of that horrible math for a lot of those, because as those get higher up, that means that your marshals aren't really getting anything that's as powerful as those spells as options, right? Maybe they'll gain a feat that allows them to do something that's kind of cool, but they're not really getting any, like, major new options that are going to decimate, like some super special secret attack in an anime, right? In Novarchaic, I've kind of gone, of course there's like the basic actions, but I also have non-basic actions that people can train and adapt that are, advanced options for characters to get. So you want to parry? Awesome, you can do a parry. But then there's like a thing the character can grab that's an advanced parry that not only parries but does something else. And that's where a lot of the sort of things is that martials can get a lot of these capabilities as much as the spell slingers can also get all these interesting spells. They both can get these interesting things. As well as, I don't have spell levels. I actually never liked the idea of spell levels. I think that it mucks around the mechanics a lot.
In what sense?
So, well, there's the problem that I was kind of getting at. Trying to make every action as equal in power as every other action becomes really hard when one type of character has these actions that are quadratically getting better and better, right? And that's only based on that, not even including any of the class features or ability features that you can see. So, I don't like the idea of spells being leveled to a degree. And the reason I say that, and what I've kind of adapted for in Nova Archaic, is that all of my actions have a very basic form that arguably anyone could attempt to do. It's just going to be more difficult or whatever. Even spellcasting. Of course, you're going to have your skills as a caster be at a certain point, but you can still attempt to do it even without training and mastering that spell. But then, if you actually excel at being a spellcaster, say you're building a spellcaster, there is ways of improving that spell to make it as if you made it more powerful, and that's true with the martial actions, right? So, to kind of get into a little bit of the weeds of the design, because I don't think Eternal GMs have seen Nova Archaic, and I just want to clarify a little bit to everyone who's here anyways. Nova Archaic has the crit system, or not a crit system, but well, kind of like a critical system, where you have these points called metal that you get temporary metal for not only hitting the difficulty of the roll, but exceeding it every 5, right? You can spend that metal to then cause new effects. All actions have that capability. Martials have an easier time increasing their damage. Casters actually don't increase damage as often as other ancillary effects, maybe like increasing their range or, adding on some stuff to them. But it always depends on the action, and so that kind of makes the leveled spell. In the sense that, say that you're trying to cast some version of a fireball, if you're wanting to do as a fireball like, the Dragon Game's fireball, you have to hit a certain difficulty, right? You have to get that D20 to land on a certain number or higher, and then spend a certain number of temporary metal, which that metal you can also have some stored on your character, but that's too far into the weeds, so that's fine. But to me, that kind of balances, or not even to me, to the playtest, to how I've been building it, everything shows that is a good way to balance these options. Because it means that the martial versus the casters, they both have this sort of thing, but they're better at doing their own stuff, allowing their flavors to showcase. Right? And I think that's the more important part, at least for my design, is like showcasing and showing off that flavor.
Interesting. So, so it seems like for Kyle and Eternal, the way to kind of handle this divide is to add in a little bit more resource management, right? Because I think that by making fighters, their attack speed up, what they do with those 3 seconds better, giving them more reactions. It lets them take advantage of action economy better. Or in of Archaic, like that, the metal option gives everyone kind of a resource game to play, which doesn't come up as much in the modular system that Blaze has, because that modular build lets people kind of grab a little bit from everything, so you're not confined to like, oh, you started in Wizard, you're going to be here for the rest of your life, or Fighter World, where, sorry, there's no promotions out. So interesting. Okay.
I want also, like, as Marshall, the historian, said in the chat, also wanted to add my opinion to leveled spells. I agree with Marshall, to the historians. I do like the idea of leveled spells. If I'm playing a spellcaster, I don't like the idea that my spell at level 1 is not really like, and the spell that much different from the spells I learn at level 12, right? I want to feel my mastery over reality and it increasing over time by giving me more bombastic effects. But I think there's also in the philosophy, do you want horizontal leveling or vertical leveling? If you're aiming to prevent great power increase in the player characters, then yes, leveled spells are definitely a problem.
Right.
I think another problem, as you said, that it kind of invalidates other actions if there's a clear power difference. The way I try to implement that yes, you get those more bombastic abilities, but they do not fully outshine the lower options. At least in my systems, I have an upcasting systems, which is purposefully built that a tier 1 ability is just as powerful as a tier 5 ability if you upcast it up to tier 5. The effects of tier 5 may look more bombastic, but tier 1 abilities still stay viable until endgame and beyond. And that way you can have both. You can have those bombastic effects that feel really awesome at higher levels, but you also can, have like the Firebolt, which scales up and does insane single target damage at level 12, which just pump your all the willpower you got into it.
Right. I do want to clarify. I didn't mean like what, like when I was saying leveled spells, I was talking about specifically how the Dragon game does the spell levels, because
the one who shall not be named.
Wizards of the Coast is a horrible thing. Anyways, I was specifically talking about the Dragon game and the like-minded level of spells, where they actually have the spell level mechanic, where each level is kind of awkward and kind of builds off the past level, but then the only way to properly gauge if something's powerful or as powerful as it should be is like to compare it with the other spells. Like that's kind of the gist that I was going for. The climb, I don't think, is very efficient, because, I mean, especially when compared to Marshall's, because you have nothing else, right? You're not normally giving them special actions that are also leveled capabilities that are as powerful, and that's where that sort of system falls.
I mean, most of us dislike the way the Dragon game, as you called it, handled it. I mean, I've seen your YouTube channel, GM, like first video, burning all your 5 ebooks. I think that says something about your opinion of the game.
Well, if you watch the whole video, I think there's one clip that sums it up better than anything, and that's the Van Richten's book. I'm a huge fan of the Shadowfell, so why the hell is the Shadowfell now Ravenloft when that's a castle in a domain of dread within the Sea of Sorrows that's within the Shadowfell? Like, we're skipping 4 tiers of names. Like, it was insulting.
Right.
And it was just a glorified...
why can't we see Jeff, by the way? You still there,
Jeff turned off his camera or something. Jeff,
I
Jeff,
hope.
Jeff. Something might have happened. I was just
Let's hope it's not something too serious. I just wanted to, make sure that maybe you know, but
I trust Jeff. I trust Jeff.
Yeah, you did make a short out of that specific scene, didn't you?
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, I feel like it really covers it because, like, you put the name there because it was popularized because of Curse of Strahd, but you didn't actually care about the fans. We've wanted a Shadowfell setting book, not how to make our own Realm of Dread. Like, you even found a way to piss off fans of Eberron with that one by forcing Eberron into the Shadowfell with the train Realm of Dread.
Yeah, let's not talk about the Dragon game. I don't want to.
Jeff, everything all right on your end? I think we can hear you now.
No, Jeff's dying. I guess. I haven't got
did
anything
hear
on
him
Discord.
typing for a few seconds, and I did hear him for from his side. But yeah, I think the connection dropped again. Oh well. Okay, let's just.
Man, and I was going to ask him a question.
I'm sure he'll be back in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. Okay, let's just ask each other's question. Maybe, the one problem you also mentioned with marshals don't get anything when the spell level increased, or the tier, or however you call it.
Mm-hmm.
The way I tried to solve it, I don't know, Eternal GM, if you had a look at my system, or...
I saw the video advertising your system on the website. I haven't had much time to look into it.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, we're all busy people. I don't mind at all that we didn't have the time. I'm not that entitled. But my system doesn't have spells. It has abilities, and abilities are far more reaching than what you would imagine to be a spell. It also includes stuff like battle maneuvers, just sword techniques, or moving really quickly, and all those physical abilities which you associate more with martials. And everybody at the same level gets access to higher tier abilities. And so as the casters get their juicy new spells, the marshals get fancier sword techniques. Now he dropped out completely.
He messaged me what's going on. It's fine. Keep going.
Okay, but he's in the waiting room. Should we pull him in?
Oh,
again,
if he's in the waiting room now, then go ahead and slide him back in. Sorry, I can't actually see anything on that side.
I'll take it. But I think he's fighting. But yeah. Yes. And of course, also with the increased tier, they can also upcast their sword techniques more. The way they are different than casters in my system, according to abilities, not just they have generally access to different abilities, which feel more like a fighter, or more like a wizard. But also, casters learn far more abilities, so they have more variety, and they have a willpower, which is the resource you use to use abilities. So you can blast more. While fighters, the default, if you do the normal weapon attack, you take path of attack, and then even if you run off of willpower, you can still deal solid damage with all your weapon attacks. And many abilities, many maneuver abilities, stack with your weapons attack, so you can combine your weapon with whatever special effect, trip attack, or maybe a cleave, or maybe a fire sword. So that's how I solved that problem. That when the casters get new toys, the marshals do not. I just also give the marshals new toys. Just like you also says, Techno, that you like to give everybody nice and juicy toys when they level up.
Right.
I have a question ready.
Okay.
Like I said, what I think is the core philosophical difference between martial and caster, or at least a typical martial and a typical caster. But what's your opinion? What would you say is like the core philosophical difference between martials and casters?
Internal, do you want to answer that?
I actually would have a different position in and out of combat. So, like with casters, I would say outside of combat, they're literally meant to be the more like a technician. They're the ones that are trying to solve problems with various different tools. Like you have your unlock spell, you have your lighting spell, you have all these things that can be just utilitarian. But in combat, they immediately become like battlefield control, suppression, and manipulation. Where the martial in combat is directly like the front line. They are basically the ones that help push your target so that the marsh and the mage can hit them with a singular spell to hit that area. They're meant to work with the mages, not be overshadowed by them. So that was a lot of the philosophy when designing them for me. Outside of combat for martials, you really don't have a lot in most games unless it's like social stuff. But one of our plans when actually going through each of the classes is to give certain stuff. Like, let's say the hand-to-hand guy. The hand-to-hand person is going to notice your scars on your knuckles and realize you're a fighter. They're going to be able to pick up stuff other people aren't because of their training. So by giving them these little extra bonuses, like a rogue, they're gonna notice the guy that slips a letter to the guy and go, "Oh wait, that's the underground network right there." They're gonna pick up on these without perception checks or have advantage towards certain things, just because.
Are we going?
That. I know some systems have been like, "Hey, if you use cobbler's
We can
tools,
talk after
you
my
know
stream.
stuff about leather and shoes, and if you're doing a perception check around that, you'll be able to pick up more details." But you can apply that to classes to give marshals loads of stuff they're capable of adding to the party outside of combat.
Yeah, no, I do like that. Giving them more skill things to do.
Like they're typically just limited to combat, and man, there's just so much they can offer outside of combat, and I feel that's never the design structure for them. That's always your technician style characters or your mages. Give them all the outside of combat stuff, but most games have wizards being the I can do everything, I don't need you. Just give me some rogue and monk levels and I got this. And it's like that's not cool. Like that's not a great game design.
I like my mages to be able to punch people. That's just, especially if they can cast with fist. Favorite thing. Just punch a spell and
Make your little goblin barbarian that has like all the health in the world.
go back to some 3.x days where you have some ridiculous feats and you just have your caster actually use your strength or con instead of the normal casting stats. And yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff for 3.5. I just cannot be more grateful that we got away from THACO. Like, look, someone tried to ask me to explain that the other day, and they're like, wow, has it been that long? It's like, no, it just worked finally. And I'm like, what? I forgot it. I don't have to have it in my head anymore. Because, like, come on, you don't play 3.5 and not be able to break down half of that off the top of your head, at least. You've been playing long enough, that whole system is in your head.
It's been long enough that I need to actually reread stuff. No.
So, Yuka, what's your opinion about the philosophical main differences between the two?
So, honestly, it boils down to, and this is kind of the sort of thing, when I'm creating a character space, I'm considering, well, what is that space? And for me, when it comes to martial combatants versus casters combatants, because keeping them in the same sort of regional, like it's not even like martial combat, like martial users versus like casters, to me the big thing would be they have their own aspects that they care about, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Sorry,
back.
I just
you got
I
really
was so happy
excited.
to see him again.
It's been so long.
Hey, everybody, sorry about that. Little restart there to get things going, make it fun.
So what was I saying?
Sorry,
don't
I
remember.
got distracted by Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. So like marshals, obviously to me they deal with the real, and that's kind of the big thing. Like, in the sense that marshals will not only be the crazy combatants, but they might actually be some of the best or better they will be the non magical stealth members, right? And so they deal with the real, where casters deal with the magical, and there's kind of like that divide. What they can handle is dictated by what they do. Like now, for those who's watched a couple of these, I have also made statements that I do believe in kind of mixing builds and sort of stuff like that. So a marshal could, in fact, build to try and handle some of the magic stuff, but they may not be the best one to deal with that magic stuff. Like, you could have a gunspurt who knows how magic works and functions, but that doesn't mean they're going to have the capability to handle that all the time. It's the different tools that they have, right, and that they're good at. But then again, No Archaic is a classless system, and I had to kind of make this approach in a very sort of generic way, to where there are these fields and these type of characters exist, but I can't hard code and say all characters are going to be like this, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do get it. Like, your system is also very modular, just as mine. And also, like, with my system, you can basically break every rule. You can just start investing so much into abilities that you can make any martial character into like being closer towards a classical caster than a normal weapon fighter, right? Also, one thing I wanted to think about, when Eternal GM, you were talking about marshals getting skills outside of combat. I was thinking about my system and like, they are lacking a little bit in out of combat utility. I guess I also focused mine more towards combat. Of course, the like the flexibility of my systems always allows you to have a character which is great at both. I actually have some sub archetypes which are specifically about combining combat capabilities with skills. The Wanderer, for example, that can use a weapon with a skill. With one of the skills, for example. But yeah, I might try to focus on giving the marshals more utility abilities. They do have a couple, but maybe I want to give them more.
See,
Out of
I
that
feel
weakness.
a lot of those things just kind of, they're not like a part of, like, a big thing we did with the design structure was we didn't want to take basic stuff. Like, as a caster, you don't have to use a selection for like dispel, detect magic. These are just generic things that are in the ability dice system. So when looking at something like, hey, this guy's a marshal, so he can tell that you don't sharpen your sword because it's blunt, and you don't oil it because it's got rust, so obviously you're not very much in consistent training. So he can now act different, use that knowledge, and use an intimidation check, knowing it's going to work better than a persuasion, because this guy might actually be a coward or hasn't been in battle for a while or is injured. There's some reason. And allowing a marshal to immediately pick up on that because of their training is just an element I don't see in a lot of games. But you don't have to put it to a perception check. You don't have to put it as, hey, this is a class feature. No, this is just something that is because of the class choice you made. I never really liked the fact that, now don't get me wrong, I love Deckard Cain from Diablo, but I don't think you need some old dude to be able to tell you what magic is if you are a magician. If you can detect that, hey, I feel magic's around, you should be able to go towards it. There shouldn't be a spell, there shouldn't be a check. It's, you can feel it. You use magic, it should be pretty common and easy to you to build a feel the presence. But a lot of games will make you check. I feel this adds like a whole nother layer of the immersion to it. You're able to feel more like your character if you know what they're capable of. Even on the case of like a field medic, you could recognize certain plants and poisons and stuff offhand, and you can be like, no, we need to do this. And the game master can give that information because that character would know that because they're this class. They've been doing it for years, obviously, because they have these skills.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a baseline of knowledge. Like as a martial artist, I can look at your wrist and the way that you walk and tell your training level to a pretty good degree. That's literally normally a perception check or investigation more clearly. But for me, that's just innate to be able to notice these things.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that talks on a live stream a lot would notice the person that's making the new mistakes. Like I've caught myself not looking at my camera several times and looking at the screen. These are things
aren't we
that are
all
built
looking at a screen? Like usually, like with my normal setup, the camera is on the side, and I'm looking at the screens. See your faces. So I think there are many streamers that don't look at the camera, right? Like
Definitely video game streamers. It depends on the type of streamer, right? Because like if you're playing a video game, you can't look at the camera all the time. Now you will when you're talking to the audience and you have a moment, you will look at the camera. But yeah.
But I think what's more important there, and it's something that I very much agree with what Eternal's saying, is these classes do have to have a built-in baseline of knowledge to make those classes feel competent, right? It feels kind of bad or dumb if they're like, hey, I don't know if there's magic here. Wizard, is there magic? And they fail their detect magic spell, and they're like, I don't know. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't understand why you're on this adventure.
Well, you got this green energy in the corner and this skeleton standing up. I don't know, man. I don't really see magic, baby.
I don't
get into a doctor.
I don't know. Like I imagine it's kind of like if you've ever been next to those like little power stations, those power grid stations, or if you've ever if you're old enough to remember people who had like those really old TVs that when they're on but not on, but you can hear that hum in the background that just like can drive you mad a little bit. Yeah, and it's like, cool, that's a perfect place to be like, all right, you're the wizard, you know what that sound is. But if you imagine somebody who's 15 now walks into a room and the TV's on but not on, making that noise, they'd have that moment of like, what the hell is going on?
Right. I mean, that's sorry, I was just going to say that's actually really true, even for like if you're just so used to city life and then you go into the country and you're like, I don't hear things. What?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you're used to, where you to make yourself competent to survive the area you're around, right? And that especially should apply towards classes. That was one of my favorite parts about reading of the what are we saying? That show will not be named. The book filled with
the dragon, the dragon, yeah, the dragon game.
Yeah, the dragon game. That was one of my favorite things when I read the pre-releases for 5e and stuff. Was, oh wow, this is really neat. I really enjoyed the idea of a ranger who legitimately right off the bat is, I can't get lost in the woods unless it's magical in nature. I can always find food. I'm competent at my job at level 1. It's like, awesome. I love that because nothing feels doofier than, hey, what's your backstory? Well, I'm a really cool ranger guy and I do ranger stuff. Okay, roll me a survival. 2, you've never lit a fire in your life. And you're like, well, looks like my fingers now butter, guys. Womp, womp, womp. And the barbarian's like, I rolled a nat 20 on my knowledge arcane check because of the following genius moments I've had. You're like, sure.
That's also kind of one of the things that I've always kind of, and we've kind of talked about it in prior things too, like just knowledge checks in general. Where I mean, if you are a certain skilled in a knowledge check, you should have knowledge about those things, even if it's just general approach to it. So the fact that you might have a maxed out skill in like knowledge arcane, and then you come up to a magical door that has like a fortification rune on it, and you're just kind of like, I've never seen that before. Like, really? Or you see again with the magic, and you're just like, wow, that torch is constantly glowing. I don't know how they did it. It must be magic. And everyone looks at you because you're like, don't you have a light spell?
Yeah, the nat 1 for a master wizard has always been a problem for me. Like, my greatest example is, hey, wizard, we need you to light the fire. Okay. That's not cool and shouldn't be possible. Gandalf shouldn't blow up the party because he rolled a nat 1.
Right.
Like, it just shouldn't be possible. Now, if the flames scream or smell like someone's bathroom, okay, it's an inconvenience nat 1. But it's not a dangerous.
Right.
It's inconvenient.
Yeah, that was also important. Like, I really dislike the natural one when you're supposed to be like top level world class. That's also why with my system with skills, as soon as you have a skill level of 5, you're immune to critical failures. If you roll a 1, you still add your modifiers, and if you have a roll 5, the value is still going to be very good.
Right.
But it also works the other way around. You cannot get a critical success unless you have a skill level of 3 in it. So the barbarian that never learned anything about magic cannot suddenly understand the magical door just because you rolled a natural 10. I use D10s for my skill checks.
Right.
For us, it's the training system. When you get a spell to expert, it gets a +5 to the modifier. So on a technicality, it can't hit a 1. But if you hit a 1, it's now an inconvenient thing instead of a damaging one. So it's not a wild magic roll. It's inconvenient magic roll, I guess.
Right.
To do that part.
It's
Go ahead.
No, it's the difference between turning on the computer and going right to accidentally hitting the search bar into some bizarre website nobody wants while you're trying to show off your PowerPoint presentation, right? That one on there, and like,
when you accidentally
that's your wish.com list.
Right, when you accidentally show your porn in a business meeting, right?
Precisely, natty 1. It's inconvenient. You're not getting fired. You're not taking damage, but everyone's going to look at you a little bit weird for the next couple weeks at work.
Look, man, the senator that accidentally clicked the cat head for his I will never forget this.
Cat lawyer was wonderful.
Yeah, it made the sad crying cat face for a moment. I'm like, this is gold.
Sir, I can promise you I'm not a cat.
I can promise you I'm not a cat. I forgot about that line. I forgot about that. I promise you I'm not a cat. No,
I do have to share this joke I sent with to Blaze just because we keep calling it the Dragons game, but can we just call it Dwarves in Discourse?
No, I'm gonna keep. No, I mean I don't. That's fine. I don't care what we call it as long as we understand what we're talking about. Yeah. I just, yeah.
No, there's a part of it which we kind of see a little bit from all of your systems is that what is it? It feels, because you mentioned this earlier with marshals being, I guess, perceptually more grounded in reality. Like we all have human bodies that are able to do certain human actions that we can frame at least what we expect a marshal to be limited to do, right?
Right.
Is where I feel like that kind of backfires for marshals of someone says, oh, I want to run, jump off this table, grab the chandelier and do this. Someone's going to be like, well, I need a roll for that. And it feels a little odd when you think about it, because if you were a kid playing, it's not hard to jump off something and grab a branch.
Right.
Right. Now, if you want to do the gymnastics in like Jurassic Park 2 so you can take out the Velociraptor, yeah, you're probably gonna need a roll, right? That's a little outside of the purview. But that ties in with the knowledge checks and the competence is, there should be a level of suspension of belief to just say, hey, marshals have the competence to do this.
Right.
Which we already give to mages, where to some extent, or we have silly stuff like the roll to see if you detect magic, basic function of your job, where the idea there is kind of to mimic that, what Eternal was saying of, oh, we got to kind of gatekeep magic by making it be chaotic and hard to do because it's very complicated. But if it's very complicated and you can't do your basic function, I don't understand why the hell there would be a wizard college in this universe. If 5% of the time a wizard goes, nope, I can't do my job, you'd be like, well, I can't have this guy on my work staff. This is useless. Like,
right. I can't have this guy's guy at my Wendy's. Please let him leave.
Yeah.
I actually have one that either hits like gold with people or they just hate it. So I want to hear how all y'all feel about it. So as someone that has trained in martialism for like 2 decades, I can tell you that my initiative, I don't have to roll versus non-martials. I'm just gonna react before y'all, like anyone who's not a martial. So in our system, I'm gonna try it as marshals order against each other by their initiative mod. They roll versus each other if they have matching mod. Half marshals roll initiative with advantage, and everyone else rolls initiative. That way, marshals really are the masters of the physical combat field.
I mean, I guess it kind of makes some interesting sense, but I don't know how I feel about it. That's one of those mechanics I'd have to see it in action, because my game designer perspective is like, I feel like it could slow down gameplay, right, and could increase the difficulty curve of the system to introducing to new players. But that's kind of, I can't really say much about that system in particular without seeing it in action.
True. We do want to play test that, but I will say we are specifically trying to bring the concept of get good into tabletop. If you do not learn the system, you do not get good at it, you will die. We will have an actual difficulty modulator that mimics our training system. So from untrained to master. If you can beat our modules at master, you are good at our game.
Sure.
We recommend you play untrained. This is where reactions are held back, and a lot of options are held back just to get you used to it.
Having more and more. And like, I'm not necessarily like against having tiered difficulty. We actually had an entire discussion about difficulty in tabletop the last time we was able to get together and discuss almost a month ago. Like, I think that's a interesting way of handling things, but like I said, from design space wise, I don't know. What do you guys think?
First of all, I want to say it's just when you said someone who trains martial arts far more quicker, I just had to think about my best friend who has also trained many years in different martial arts. And one time I was with him, I have basically zero. I guess technically as a child I did a little bit of taekwondo, but I forgot parts of it. Like I got no training basically, and I was just punching the air because sometimes it's just fun punching the air with zero technique. And then my friend was like, "Let me try it," and just the way he punched with so speed, precision, like he wanted to kill that air, and everybody around him was like, "Whoa, calm down, dude!" Don't anger him. It's a difference. Even as an amateur, you totally see it. It's like.
So you see how like you could build in certain social mechanics to martials just being outright more intimidating, not because of high strength or anything, but their prowess and their specific skills. So like that's exactly why I'm talking about like the advantage on initiative thing, the extra reactions, the extra movement speed. yeah, it's going to give them a major advantage, but we are dealing with a talking about a gap that basically at halfway through, like D&D, you are already breaking down. Like, why be a marshal? Your AC, your damage output, everything across the board is better as a magician. So why ever not be a caster in that game? In this one, from the very get-go, you're getting level 1 stuff from your grouping, your class, and your subclass. You have your ability die system and access to our inspiration system, which actually has class-based abilities. So you would have 3 different things that come from inspiration. So you've got about 10, 12 options from the get-go, not including your spells, not including your weapons. All weapons have unique abilities, including at Master. Each one of them will have a unique crit ability. So focusing hardcore on marshals, I just had to stop at giving them chi abilities because I realized, okay, I've toned down mages 2 stages and brought marshals up 4. We need to test this. And I'm going to tweak it from there. But once we have that, you really do have a balance. That maybe the initiative thing dies, or maybe something else goes. Because I really do like the fact that they move first. Like, if all of a sudden, think about this situation. If a gunshot goes off, who moves first? Always going to be the people who are more trained in those kind of scenarios.
Right.
So this is Indian. But you're right. I don't want it to overbalance it to where now marshals are the thing that you're dumb if you don't pick them because why play a caster? That's the thing I'm worried about.
Right.
And I would solve that. Sorry.
I was just going to say, there are a couple of different initiative concepts that can also do things that also simplify it. Like, I'm actually a big fan of static initiatives. Because they're a lot faster and a lot easier to handle most of the time. Like, yeah, you don't get the feeling of the rolling all the time, but I mean, you can guarantee that the marshal is going to go first because maybe the marshal classes have that benefit, right? They just have a higher initiative overall, and that's one solution to simplify. Because I don't know. I'm not a big fan of constantly rolling initiatives. Because when you're actually doing a lot of dungeon games, which is different than the dragon game, when you're doing the dungeon games, you actually get a lot of... You can get in the weeds a lot with needing to roll initiative over and over and over again. And then there's times where, like, well, that combat ended, but it was only like 6 seconds before this combat. So are we keeping initiative or not keeping initiative? And it just kind of gets mucky.
I blanket. You roll initiative for once. I might have you re-roll it at the boss battle or like a mini boss, but you roll initiative for the dungeon. You roll it for the house. I cut out a lot of the initiative issue by just going, no, we're going to do it once. Because I do like giving credit for your stat choices, your bonuses, and everything you're doing. But like you said, I don't want to sit there and go, hey, you keep running into battles because you're choosing to fight everything. So now this dungeon that was supposed to take 1 4-hour session is taking 2 months. Cut out anything you can.
Right.
I do agree with Techno. I also not a fan of rolling. It's like when the action is about to start. So, okay, everybody, well, okay, you get that. I have to order that. Your suggestion is an interesting compromise, doing it at the start. But you can also achieve like different strengths for characters which have a natural higher initiative with a static number value. If I would apply your system, Marshall gets a bonus, I would maybe like give them +7 on their on Marshall initiatives. Also, one thing I want to note that I've been noticing, like the difference in philosophy it can be very different if you have like a specific setting in mind, like do you do, or if you do it more generic. And I noticed if you have a specific setting in mind, it's far more predetermined what the martial character will be good at and how he will fight. Like the idea of martial characters are more attuned to the world, while casters are more supernatural. And I'm just thinking, well, I cannot presume that in my system. You could play a caster in my systems, which technically is just always picking up rocks and is so burly and skilled that he's just chucking them, and that's his physical projectile, right?
I cast magic missile with my fist.
Exactly. Like actually, throwing a rock is one of the flavor examples I give for when I said the abilities can be anything like this, and this, or just throwing a rock with physical projectile.
Right.
Or on the other hand, you could have a martial which wields his sword with his mind, and it's like a mental type, and physically he's actually kind of weak, and then you cannot really presume all that intimidating stature or being more, I know about magic and don't know about magic. Even a caster, even if it's not like a burly man throwing rocks, in my system, it could be a scientist with experimental tech, and then it has nothing to do with magic. Or it could be a psionic. And you just cannot presume any of those things, which I think in your systems makes a lot of sense. It's great, giving your marshals baseline capabilities.
Right.
About knowing how weapons work, being able to read people physically and such. But that doesn't work at my system at all because it is system agnostic, right?
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. One of the biggest things I've been getting, the only negative position I've had about my system has been the intention is when we do the Kickstarter, we're releasing the core system book, the game module, the Secret Realms, which is actually the setting. So now you're adding magic and psionics. You're now adding a whole world to it. The core system is just marshals, technicians, just baseline stuff to play. You can play any random scenario. You could pick a horror movie and run that as a game. You could do whatever. So it is entirely agnostic for setting until you grab Secret Realms or Chronicles of the Agrigori or Cyber Tales when the games are going to release. Now you're adding these different types of classes, maybe new technology. In the cyberpunk setting, it's really now a whole lot of new tools and kits and stuff like that that come into it. So when we designed this, I wasn't actually thinking about a tech level, a species, or anything. Just I wanted to design the core system as the mechanics translation of the physics of the Mystic Portal verse. So no matter which game you play, marshals have those advantages. Now, those advantages might be nullified if everybody is in power suit armor and you are not. If we have space mystics or Jedi, maybe your big muscles don't mean anything to them. But to anyone that would apply to, which could be built in the way the trigger is described for that social interaction, it can still apply setting regardless.
Right.
You're going to have these different tags that make it interact different.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I guess with my system it's still a little bit different because I really go for radical flexibility, where you can really have the burly caster, which casts fist, right? And but yours is, I guess, a little more grounded in a certain rule, certain perspective, which isn't at all a bad thing. Don't think I'm implying that. We just have different philosophies, and
well, I think that is actually a very important separate issue to the martial caster divide is setting, right? I think this is also a big problem of things that Shadowrun probably not as much so, but when we see modifications to back in the 3.5 era, we had like D20 Modern and things like that. In a world like what Blaze is creating, it's kind of fine being setting agnostic, and the way the classes are all very modular. You kind of Lego build whatever you want to play with, right? And so do your friends, and so then you all have your own Bionicles. It's awesome. Versus if we're talking about something a little bit closer to archaic that is leading into kind of a modern tech thing, or if we're learning into something more of a fantasy style, that setting is going to really change how you interpret what magic's supposed to do.
Right.
Versus martials are supposed to, which is odd because this is something I have not seen when I see those homebrew things like, oh, I've brought the Dragons game into sci-fi cyberpunk, and it's like, all right, sweet, let's take a look at this. But this dude can still cast Magic Missile, and
Right.
Magic Missile has remained unchanged for hundreds of years. It's tradition. My grandfather shot one missile. I shoot one missile. That's what we all do for eternity. And it's kind of like, it's kind of weird that nobody ever updated this, right?
Yeah.
Because then you get the weird interactions, like things like explosive runes. Can I send an email with that? Does that count? Like,
Right.
why couldn't I? If that's so, I think that's actually a really important thing, because if you're in a fantasy setting and people's brain goes to Lord of the Rings, sure, magic should be all powerful, right? Gandalf scares away the Nazgul. He makes the sun rise. He does all this weird stuff because that guy's magic as fuck. In a world where nobody else has it. So
Right.
it is an unstopped source, right? It's an unstopped power. Versus in a more modern game, it feels that a lot of modern tech should be replacing magic, unless magic actually updates, which is, I think the weirder part is we see in a lot of games that magic doesn't update. It remains a traditional, antiquated concept, right? It is very much Han Solo making fun of the Jedi. It's weird. It's like, oh, so you guys have still casting telekinetic swords since the first edition of Jedi, huh? That's weird. I fly a spaceship.
Wow.
Like, you guys should learn how to do something cooler.
Why are you swinging that magical sword around when you could just throw a grenade?
Like it's in Indiana Jones,
Right.
He just
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we wanted to build in with this setting genre kind of agnostic thing was we wanted to look at, so our magic items, one of the rankings of them is basically rarity. So when you pick up our setting, it's going to tell you a rarity of magic. So now that rarity is, if it's saying it's very rare, so now your very common magic items are very rare. And you walk up that scale, and once you hit the max rarity, everything beyond that is now, it doesn't exist. That's too powerful of magic. It doesn't exist. So also with learning of the spells, if it's very rare, you're losing the first levels of spells. So you'd have to increase in your spell casting far enough to where you're getting the more basic stuff, showing that magic is so much more uncommon and harder to possess, but also more limited. So this allows you to shift the rarity and power of magic by its presence in the world based off of how rare you're saying it is. Same can be done with psionics and technology.
Right.
So that was one of the ways that we kept the system agnostic while being able to go, I wanted to be able to jump from Old West to now we're traveling through space fighting in mechs with vampires and superpowers.
And I'm going to just quickly grab onto this because this is something that, as a person who's been working on modern day setting, that sort of thing of considering how magic evolved or needs to evolve, or even how just tech approaches magic is such a huge consideration because I'ma just call out an entire genre of world of something that is always kind of pissed me off that it's so common, but I understand why, of when like magic interacts poorly with tech always, and it makes no absolute sense, right? Like it's, oh man, you got a sling that's tech, so the magic is going to make it not function, and you're like, why? Well, because magic. Hold up.
I mean, it works well in something like Mage the Ascension, I believe, which has
right.
kind of the paradox reality thing, right? If enough sleeping people kind of say, I didn't see a fireball, you can't fireball, and then that blocks it. That's kind of a fun idea.
Right.
But it is funny to imagine all these things where they say, well, technology limits magic, and you kind of have to break down and be like, technology is crossbows, dude.
Right.
Like the first guy who realized, whoa, if I take my loincloth and put a rock in it, I can send a rock at 30 miles an hour from 50 feet away. This is way better than throwing. Guys, throwing is dumb. Look what I've created. It'd be funny to see the wizard like, well,
artificer.
yeah, like the world's first artificer was like, I can make things go way further if I have this lever. Well, bam. And it's funny to imagine the mage being like, well, I can't magically enchant that sling. Too technologically advanced for me.
Yeah. You took a couple sticks and leather, and now you got a sword. And I can't do anything with that. What?
But the setting stuff is interesting because, like, I think about like because we brought up anime before, like Dragon Ball Z, right?
Yeah.
Most of those effects we would call magical, but in that setting, all of those accomplishments that Goku and Vegeta do are all physical for them. All of that can be done through physical training and is a non-magical effect to eventually, because we see Krillin eventually flies and he's a regular human. So you don't even get to say, well, it's like, no, well, that's Saiyan powers and whatnot. But I think that is an important thing to kind of break apart. Like in your setting, is this a DBZ world? Can your fighter train under 9,000 gravity to eventually be able to uppercut the sun?
Yeah, can your Superman jump to fly?
Yeah.
See, in our system, we put these as the difference. Like we have status effects, but conditions are stuff like for a martial, if you're a boxer and you block someone's arms open, they're less capable of defending. So this is wide open. Or you have been turned to your dead side, so you can't block an attack coming from there as easy. This also is where vampirism, lycanthropy, where we would put the speed force or Z power for Dragon Ball Z characters. It's not Saiyan ability, it's like Z power.
It's Z power, yeah.
So like speed force would multiply the speed stat by 1,000. So now let's say you gain an extra amount of movement speed per certain amount of points. Now you're moving in 3 seconds in our system like hundreds of feet or thousands of feet. So now we have just used a condition that multiplies what the profile is. So it's the same profile for everyone, but these conditions allow you to ultimately control the flexibility of what superpowers to vampirism or just a regular character. So like conditions were what solved that for us when looking at how do you bring Super Saiyans in? How do you bring Master Chief in? Because like that's not just a regular human in a suit. You got to put some extra stuff there. Like any weird little thing, as long as you can make it into a condition and make it affect the profile, you should be able to bring anything into the core system.
Right.
I actually solved that problem by just mechanically, no matter how you get the ability, it works the same. But you have 4 power sources, which is just determined by your flavor, technique, biology, technology, or a supernatural. And there are few features and abilities that interact with that. Instead of having like counter spell, you have a counter ability for every power source. So counter technology, counter technique, counter biology, and so on. And well, other than these niche cases, my system doesn't really change if you're just like anime style martial training so that you can effectively teleport, or it's a magical spell that's teleport, or you have a device that teleports, or maybe you have a mutation that teleports you. I think I'm a little bit afraid that your system might have complexity, but I mean, you said you wanted a hard system to master, which some people love crunch. And
in a way, I have consistently been told it looks intimidating, but then becomes very intuitive because, like, even our D12 version, which everything has a possibility of being rolled. I've even had joking options thrown out that are not okay for every live stream, but people are like, no, I got you. You don't know how to roll for this. And it's like, it's real simple. Think of anything you can do, and if it's to hit someone, it's accuracy. If you're responding, you're pairing it with reaction. So melee accuracy or spell casting accuracy, shield strike accuracy. It is more complicated in our D12 version, which is a success roll system. But at the same time, there is never going to be something that you cannot immediately go, oh, I should be rolling this for that. So It does get more complicated, but a fan of 5e played 3 playtesting sessions of it and was able to start telling me what his roles should be. And so it becomes real intuitive. Like 20 years of work, you make every mistake in the book. And then you start going, oh, okay, so this stuff needs to be simplified. This stuff doesn't. For the core system philosophy, it's, I want one formula that I might build to add a complicated action or slight variations like that, shift the difficulty, but everything is that formula. So for D12, it's A plus B equals dice pool. If you add any other factor, like you're not adding just a skill and a stat, you're now adding a knowledge to it. It's a complicated skill, increases the difficulty rating by 2, so the roll you're going for is 2 points higher. If you get a specialty, it can lower it. So it's about exchanging and balancing that formula. So no matter what, no matter how complicated it gets, it comes back to that formula.
We shouldn't underestimate that you have been working on it for 20 years. So.
I'm not. There's a part of me that's proud of it, and it's really small. The part of me that's like, oh my god, it should be done, is bigger than the screen.
Right. Like, and I've been working on Novark for 10 years, so I understand that.
Kyle, you had a question for Jeff?
Oh, I just realized that my mic is muted. Sorry about that. I wanted to first say to Eternal, like, I understand. I've been working on specifically Novark for 10 years, but that's because Novarchaic to me is like my baby. It is my perfect setting, my perfect thing. And it's gone through a lot of iterations. So, like, I get you've been working on your thing for as long as you've been working on it. And then having that, wow, this should be done. But then, like, but no, it's not done because, had to still do other things. But we've also had time to learn because of that, right? Kind of like, and that's our strength.
Actually, the OGL situation scared me because the D20 version didn't exist at this point. I had been working 3 years on a 5e supplement, doing things like adding operate and craft into the system by just adding those skills, making them intelligence. We're done. Now any crafting and ships or complicated devices, it's done. No $50 book to replace it. Whole lot of stuff like that. Then this situation happened with the playtest they were bringing out for D&D 1. And I'm like, I think it was the second one. I walked into my friend's room and said, no, we're changing the 5e supplement to our own system. We need to change these things to make it not 5e. And we're going to use our class style system we've been discussing.
Sure.
And for the past 4 months, 5 months maybe, that's what I've been doing, is turning a 5e supplement into the D20 core system. Sure. So it actually may have completely stopped what I've been working on for a majority of that time.
Sure.
But now the ability die system is a thing. Knowledge checks and having a base selection of, hey, if you roll this knowledge, the Game Master can look in the book and go, hey, in this setting, it also says you should know this with that roll. Game Master might not even know that about the setting, but we're going to give you this list of information to help build the lore and everything that your player character should know.
Sure.
So I never would have came across that if not for stopping the D12 system and working on this.
Right. Good on Wizards to help everybody else from their mistakes. Anyways,
it's called shooting yourself in the foot,
right? But yeah, I did want to before we like I'm not saying that we're going to end this, but before too long, I did have a question for Jeff because he's here. So yeah, let's throw some of these questions towards him so he can say things. So like, yo, what about you? Like, you're obviously you don't make your own system, but with your podcast, what do you do to help mitigate casters v marshals?
Honestly, I don't too much. I have a lot of really great players that see how the world we've all built flows, and this is what was really important. Kind of what Eternal brought up as well as you, Kyle, is that setting is a huge part of that, right? You know, there's a sorcerer in the party, and most of the spells they're taking are ones that function usefully in a modern kind of setting. They're not taking Burning Ray because, well, you don't shoot Burning Rays in an office building, kind of thing.
I didn't ask the dimensions of the room. I said I cast Fireball.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Fireball is
You
effectively
can't fire me. I fire you.
Yeah, Fireball in a modern setting is a domestic terrorist.
Right.
Like,
you're not wrong.
yeah, I mean, I'm going to make a house-sized explosion in 6 seconds. Cool. The police are going to have to put you down. Like, that's an inexcusable character to be wandering around doing whatever they want. Especially if you're leaning into kind of a corpo-fascist dystopia, right? But yeah, so I personally found my players have always been very, very responsible and reasonable with how they behave with magic and how they play with it. One of my favorites was a character. He played the full 9-tier wizard, and really, oh god, I think most things, you know, they'd get to a door that's stuck or something, and they're like, "Well, open it, mage." And he's like, "Dude, I didn't go to fucking wizard college, so I could open doors for you." Fighter, break that down. You know how to use lockpicking tools. Open the door. I'm not going to waste a spell. Like, I have a degree in conjuration for a goddamn reason, and it's not to open doors. It's like, perfect. And he'd get away with entire sessions never casting a single spell, just role playing and having fun with skill points. But that's my table, right? And that's something that we all enjoy. It became a last minute thing of, okay, looks like the Hounds of Tyndalos are about to attack. What are you going to do? And the wizard's like, all right, gunslinger, what if you had greater invisibility and haste and just go crazy house? Take everything down, do what you got to do, but I'm just going to hang out because I don't get my hands dirty. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of why I think setting is really important in how you fit it. And that's why, like, the spells also have to make sense. I had a talk with Oswald, one of the players in my podcast, about a spell he took, which was Eyes of the City. It's a Pathfinder spell, which thematically was supposed to let you Spider-Man or Batman kind of thing, right? You go stand up on the top of a building, you look out over the city, and it gives you a whole bunch of information over the town, and you're like, someone's getting their purse stolen. And then
the Assassin's Creed thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh man, it's time for me to go hero up there while somehow I understand everything. But when we looked through the spell, it became really a confusing kind of mess because the spell was designed with the idea that you were in a fantasy city. And then when you take that into a modern city, it's like, well, this is bizarre, right? Because these spells don't work. And so, or these spells don't flow the way they're intended to, which means we can still make it work. It's fine. It just requires a little more DM fiat.
Homebrew the table.
Yeah, and like for my own world, I've made initiative based on base attack to kind of fit in with what Eternal was saying. Is I do believe marshals should have a better reaction time. I mean, I have a few friends from the military, and when we're hanging out and I'm next to a construction site, when a certain noise goes off, both of them are standing up ready for something because it reminded them of artillery, right? Versus me, I'm sitting there with, a half beer in my hand going, what's that? They're like, and it's very clear, I do not survive.
I mean, same. If zombie apocalypse, I probably don't survive.
Right, exactly. I've been to the gun range a few times, but if I was standing in an open area and somebody shot something off, my brain doesn't recognize that immediately. For them, it would. There's an active shooter. We need to follow the following procedures because we've been trained. So for my own games, base attack applies to initiative. So that way, yes, marshals generally will go faster. Those mid characters, rogues, and bards and whatnot will go quicker than the wizard, who honestly probably is not used to people swinging swords at their head, right? Or at least that's the assumption of the design of that character based on how the class was originally put forth. Is I'm a learned Gandalf, and look at me. And once they go outside, it becomes a little harder to react. But that's what I like about the modular system like Blaze has, or kind of what I see from Nova Archaic is maybe building that a little differently. You can have your combat-trained wizard that doesn't necessarily have to be shooting fireballs, but I use an arcane source. I know how to throw a few punches. I've been, I did martial arts because I want to take care of my body. And guess what, guys? I studied magic.
Right.
Those shouldn't be mutually exclusive.
Right. And that actually kind of goes in. Go ahead, Blaze.
Sure.
I'll let you.
Thank you. The thing is also, like, you do have, if you really want the flexibility, you do have that stereotype of, like, the big, strong, kind of dumb, maybe a little bit slow guy, that just stand there, you punch him, it doesn't do him anything. Oh, who's a little bit slow, but still clearly a martial character. And if you really want a system where you can build everything, you also need to be able to build a slow, dumb tank, right? In my system, Eternal GM, I solved it. The main source of initiative is your instinct, one of the 7 stats. You get twice your instinct on your initiative. And there are 5 of the 34 skills also give you a boost to initiative. Analysis, improvisation, athletics, quick fingers, and grace. So you can have like the combat wizard, who is instinct. Instinct also is basically the T3N president. How good are you in acting without thinking? Which I think is a very important part when in combat, when acting quickly. You shouldn't overanalyze the situation or just be like, what is this? Just like reflex. Take the gun out.
Yeah. That kind of goes into what my next question was. Question for the table, if you will. The virtual table. And that is, like, instead of thinking of martial versus caster, why don't we talk about, like, martial and caster? Why don't we talk about gifts for a second? Where you have the mixing of the two. Because I think that's also something that one should consider. Because, I mean, not everything is going to always be clean cut of all martials are blank and all casters are blank. Because, I mean, some of the best classes, in my opinion, are the ones that mix it up a bit. Right? So, yeah. What about gifts? What about the martial and caster merged concepts?
You want to start, Eternal GM?
Sure. We actually took 2 different approaches. So classes are what you were saying. They're black or white. They're either this or that. But the subclasses get into, do you want to add magic? Do you want to double down on the grouping? Do you want to add a little more of this? But for things like druid, paladin, these required us to actually make a specific, what we called a dual grouping. So they are their own thing. They won't have the martial grouping abilities and some of the mage ones. They're going to have their own set. So they're specifically designed with the intention of them being basically both groupings, and building them specifically to create that balance of a dual grouping without actually just trying to shove them together for, creating that fantasy. We wanted to make sure that, the paladin has access to some of the martial stuff, but also has the magic. But since they're more of a martial, than a caster. We gave it to where their power comes through their holy item, whatever that would be. And that is what's channeling your magic. So it makes sense to have them more martially built than the mage. But where the cleric, if you were going to have the martial kind of styled one, it would be more balanced towards the caster side of it.
Mhm.
The druid in our system is actually a mystic mage. Their magic messes with the environment and controls things, but their mystic side is how they're communicating with animals and getting them to help them and do different little features and skills. So we brought the mystic and mage parts in to create that class as a dual grouping. And we found that's the only way, the way we designed our system, to make that class is to give it its own grouping as kind of, if you pick that class, you're getting this grouping pairing, and it works together to create that fantasy. So we didn't actually try and just create the druid class. We did what we needed to make it facilitate the way our system functioned. I don't think any other system that doesn't do it like this is going to come to a similar conclusion. But with how we designed martials to, if you pick any martial class, you have all martial abilities. Any caster has all mage abilities. Any psionic has all mystic abilities. You couldn't sit there and go, oh, the paladin has all spellcaster and martial abilities. You had to go, okay, so these are the weaker ones, not really weaker, but the easier to learn, more basic ones from both sides, and this is what they get. They get a split of the ability die, so your martial ability die can only be used for martial abilities, the same with the caster ones. So they have to divide it up a little further. So that's what we did.
Did I continue? Okay. With me, there are like kind of two philosophies how to approach it. Like, first of all, of the 10 archetypes, you can categorize them in 3 categories, which I call them fighter, hybrid, and caster. And again, I guess because my core philosophy is more simplified, endurance versus flexibility and higher bursts, is that the hybrid is in the bonuses, which each get basically in the middle. Fighters get 7 vitality per level, casters get 3 vitality per level, and hybrids get 5. Fighters get 1 ability every 2 levels, casters get 2 abilities each level, hybrids get 1 ability each level. And willpower also, like 2 willpower for fighters, 3 per level, 3 for hybrids, 4 for casters. And hybrids, like, certain classes have a bit of a tendency. There's, for example, the unarmed archetype and the cunning archetype, which is kind of like the rogue and the monk, which have more the focus of, yes, we are clearly having a focus on weapons, / my fist is my weapon, but we are more technique based. We learn more maneuvers and approach the battle a bit more tactical than maybe the war archetype or the bulwark archetype that are brutish. But you have also something like the nature archetype or the technology archetype, which are also hybrids, but they default tend to more towards the casting side, but being a little bit having access to better armor and being a bit more defensive while doing that. Only the demolition archetype I would say is truly in the middle, without a flavor pushing you a little bit towards caster or fighter. But there are also sub-archetypes within many of the archetypes which are specifically designed to push that archetype in one direction. The war archetype has a champion, which gives you more vitality per level and more abilities, and allows you to use a weapon attack, which you use an ability to be like that classical Gish. You have the Guardian from the Bulwark, which is kind of a magical tank, which if you keep using abilities and the enemy keeps attacking your allies, the defenses of your allies get buffed. Like you have a protective aura that builds up over combat the more abilities you use. And also, like with cunning, you have the agent, which is like the stealth-based caster. But we also have the other way around. Nature, for example, has the predator, which pushes him towards a physical combatant. And all the creative archetype, which is kind of like a bit bardy, has the dancer, which pushes you towards martial, giving you more vitality, access to more weapons, and the ability to learn, or you can learn abilities from the mental archetype. Also, what I forgot, those that push you towards cast. Sorry, not the mental archetype. The ones that push you towards martials allows you to learn the abilities of the war and bulwark archetype. The ones who push you towards castles allow you to learn the abilities from the mental archetype. Sorry, that way around. So I guess, yeah, my systems, again, flexibility, modularity, leads it to be extremely fluid and with a lot of options, which push you in one direction, the other direction, but with the tools to also push shit one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Amazing.
I would say that when we talk about gishes, I think the hardest part is to look how they fit in with the world and the setting, right? If you go back to classic 2nd edition, 1st edition, 3rd, all of those classes, it's very clear that magic was designed in a vacuum separate from combat, right? Because if you take 3 levels of wizard and 3 levels of fighter, you can do swing the sword or cast the spell. And that's honestly just because spells are designed poorly. They should interact more with, your shocking grasp should be able to go through your weapon, right? As opposed to making it this separate touch attack, which brings in a whole new thing that just kind of feels weird. And I think that's part of what we got into is why has magic never evolved or changed, right? It's not until we finally find systems that have actual gishes, the Duskblade,
the Magus from Pathfinder 2.
The Magus from Pathfinder, the Sword Sage from Dragon Game 4th edition. Things like that where they actually combine together better, which I think my favorite out of those was the Duskblade because they actually wrote a new spell list for them so that it complemented the thing, right? Like it was like, oh, cool, if you use your standard action to attack, almost all their spells were swift actions to kind of lean into what Eternal was talking about earlier about how marshals need to have reaction. Like the cool thing about being a marshal should be your John Wick scenes, right? Like it should be I block a guy while I shoot this dude, while I roll backwards, while the mage is, hey, I'm going to blow up this room and kill every bad guy, but I need you to buy me a couple rounds. But to go back to so your gishes need to be able to stay fluid. So like the Duskblade was my favorite version of that, which was like, oh, as a free action, I can cast jump. So I can charge, hit the edge, launch myself 50 feet up in the air, and make an attack before I land. And it's all within the action economy of that system. And it felt cool. It felt like the way to do it. I think that's the harder part about it is a lot of systems just simply say, hey, you're a sword fighter, you're a sword wizard now. Which they're treating it kind of like, oh, cool. So you're you do the info security for your college you're at or your company, and you're also a boxer. Do you want to punch him in the face or decode this buggy software? And you're like, oh,
I can't do both.
That feels like that feels kind of awkward to do right now while this guy's trying to punch me. And they're like, one or the other, because you're a gish.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're going to offer the options of gishes and those sort of characters in your setting, now less a problem for Blaze with very modular. Once again, we get back to our sweet Lego builds. This is my starship and it's a castle. Don't judge me. It's awesome. I love it. But for builds that have more linear classes or feat trees or whatnot, I think it is very important that the system reflects how did this style come to be? How does this work together to make an actual Gish and not a dude who, I don't know, has a taser in one hand, is holding a pie in the other?
Yeah, that does remind me. I forgot one very important part of the whole. If you really want the Gish in my system, I did mention the path, and there's one path I specifically designed for the Gish type fighting. Oh, you can use it in a different way. I specifically designed for that path of flash attack. My system has a 3-action economy, and using the attack action takes you usually 2 action points. And with the 1 action point, you can't do much more other than move or maybe some quick abilities. But path of flash attacks allows you to do a flash attack action for 1 action point at the cost of not being able to use the attack action that turn. But most of the single target abilities cost 2 action points. So you can use a single target ability and attack in the same turn. The main weakness of this build is it has a higher damage output, but you do not have any like reliable options left once your willpower runs out.
Sure. You become useless if the combats go long.
Yes, exactly. That's how I balance it.
Okay.
Of course, if you want to do like the bombastic area effect, this abilities those usually take 3 action points, so you cannot blow up the room and shoot the last guy standing. Unless you take the greater talent, no time to stop, which allows you to reduce 3 action point actions to 2 action points. But I mean, yeah, like I said, my system is flexible. If you really want to do it, there's usually a way to do it in my system.
Okay.
Just a reminder that you mentioned. Oh yeah, I do have this thing.
Yeah. Words.
Words. Sentences.
Yeah. No. Those were all great things. I like what you guys was talking about. How gishes exist in your systems, and even the spiel that Jeff did about just. I mean, it is something that we have to consider, right? Like for settings about how do gishes exist or why do they exist, and because. I mean, yeah, Magic, for a lot of systems, like the Dragon game, was designed in a vacuum. Because, well, I can't give any good reasons for why they did that, but I can say, like, that is definitely the course, where they designed it without some other considerations with how it interacts with other bits of the system.
I mean, you can understand where it comes from with Chainmail like D or Dragon game having its very basic roots in being a war game simulator.
Right.
It's easy to go, we're all marshals at one point.
Right.
And then someone said, what if we had wizards? And they're like, dope, let's bring magic in. So the new guy gets to design spells.
Like, I get it from a historical perspective, but that's not to say, like, because, I mean, there's been multiple editions since then. So you would think that they would try to fix some of these problems without just stapling some new paint or however that would go. Taking some paint chips and just like, because that's obviously how you paint, right? Huh?
We know why they did it. It was cheaper. It
Right.
was easy. It wasn't the right thing or the best thing to do. But, you know, where they sell the DMG the size it is and the Monster Manual for 50, but they sell Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide for 52. I mean, we see their logic is about making money, not about making a good game.
Right.
If they were trying to make a good game, they would have decided to make basically a blueprint for this is what a class build, a race needs to be, a spell at this level. So 5 years later, when they're making these new subclasses, new class editions, if they wanted to, they're going to be balanced to the same mechanical balance you designed at the very beginning. That's why it took so long to start this. Was I went, what is a marshal going to need level 1 to 30? What at max level? What's the amount of stats it's going to have in its top ones? How to balance that out? Now, how to make that across everyone while allowing diversification of the different classes? it's obvious most games don't even attempt that. They
Right.
just kind of refer to, well, how much damage was it doing there? Instead of going, well, at level 10, they should be doing about this much damage. So if a caster does this kind of a spell, it should do that amount of damage, or it should do less than it, or hey, it's a single target, so it actually should do more than that damage. There's not a balance like that. Like, you have 8d6 for Fireball. It could have been 4d6 and it would still get used as much. It would just be more strategically used instead of, oh, that's a singular enemy or 40. It doesn't make a difference. It's still ideally probably the best spell to use in that circumstance, just numbers alone. You don't have the resistances actually even backing other elemental spells being worth it. Like, the jokes about Fireball exist because of bad game design, not because of favoritism of fire spells.
I mean, there is probably a little bit of favoritism towards fire spells because the GMs, and this is an entirely different discussion, by the way. So, like, yeah.
But valid point, though.
Like, because fire, the GMs and players like to throw in extra effects and extra ancillary effects without actually considering the balance of stuff. Like saying, well, I mean, you cast a fireball, so everything else is on fire, even though the spell doesn't say that, right? Like, it's just, all of this fire happens. Nothing, it happens so fast, arguably no fire could have started, but everyone was like, well, no, everything has to be on fire now. Right? And that gives some extra effects.
Hair happens.
Huh?
I'd say some burnt hair happens.
Oh, yeah. You may have burnt stuff, but magic being magic, it kind of... But of course, that depends on the table, right? Because
I feel like Kyle hits on a very important thing there, which is those flavor things that people like to add in definitely help exacerbate that problem, right? People describe the sweet sword swing as a sweet sword swing unless it's a crit. And then if it's a crit, then it's a perfect sword swing that, like, chops off his thumb or whatever you want to throw on there. But when you think about Fireball, which does say, like, fire fills the room, it doesn't light anything on fire, it's fine, and it goes away, people still want to be like, well, the papers catch fire, right? Or the plant in the corner. But by adding in those extra effects, you're giving casters more control over reality in a way that marshals just accidentally don't. Like, whether you mean it or not, right? Like, oh, I shoot lightning bolt, it's a generic schmuck spell that just makes lightning in a column. Oh, but it hits this door, and oh, but the floor's wet, so it does more damage. Or you have these, like, conditional effects which you don't to marshals to say, like, oh, I'm running in my full plate, the floor's wet, I'm going to slide across it. Most GMs would be like, well, I'm going to need a roll for that at least, and we got to make sure that's even, how do you even slide on floors? I'm like, well, I've seen baseball guys do it, and there's a whole movie about Jason Statham fighting a bunch of dudes in a garage. I'm pretty sure this isn't that crazy of a trope to ask for.
Right?
Like, that's the thing. If you have a high-level martial character in a game like the Dragons game, isn't it supposed to feel like Hercules? Or even an anime character? Like, I don't care. Anime characters are cool. I don't care if you say that's cringe or anything.
I mean, no one's going to say that here. This is the same space. You can watch your anime, even if it's bad.
I mean, it's setting, right? Because in Forgotten Realms universe, you have literal magic gods walking around. Like, Elminster lives down the street. It's cool that you want to play a fighter dude, but that doesn't matter when people accidentally get chosen by Shar to become the goddess of the new moon of darkness and now shoot dark bolts as a free action. It's like, oh, okay, like, why is there no martial god who shows up like, I'm going to teach you how to do sick kickflips. It's going to be awesome. Like, I'm the kickflip god. You will be air combo juggling houses by the time I'm done.
That's a great campaign idea right there. Just, it's no actual magic gods. It's just all these martial gods of being like, bruh.
I'm the god of steroids. You're going to be so pumped, dude.
Oh no.
Jesus. Y'all just made me visualize like Super Giga Chad Zeus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, is it Zeus Giga Chad anyways? No.
Yeah,
I mean,
Giga Chad
just-
Zeus. You now have the like martial god of gods.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, it's weird that we see this pattern repeated over and over. That you have like even Corridor God of Strength, when they talk about like designing a champion over this, they say give them all these spells,
Right.
and instead it was like, why don't you just say like, I never have to roll a dice to kick in a door again? That would be pretty sick. If I just, oh man, do you want to backflip off this building? You do it.
Right.
Thank you, Cord God of Sick Flips.
Controversial.
Mhm.
But why not just straight up give them like, hey, you crit on your top 4 or 5 numbers because I'm the god of destruction of marshals and you're now more destructive. Like
Yeah.
we
I
look
mean,
at small things like kicking the door, but I almost look at like, why is a marshal with a strength above 12 having to test kicking the door down unless there's like an iron bar? But when it comes to like, I'm being blessed by the god of something cool. If a battle master can crit on 18 and a 19, I think a boon from a martial god should make me build a crit on a 15 plus at level 20.
Mhm.
yeah.
Maybe extra attacks for a rogue because they got blessed by the assassin god, so now they can literally move through the shadows and do like 3 sneak attacks in a turn. But we're at level 20.
Mhm.
You have cool stuff like the wizard has how many just innate spells at that point, and I think they get a level 3 one towards level 20. It's like, where's that for marshals? Like that's a fair point.
Yep. That was my big point, right? Like, casters are getting all these capabilities of just as they level up, and yet marshals are normally just given better accuracy. Sometimes.
Sometimes, I mean, with proficiency bonus, everyone's accuracy goes up the same, which feels
Right.
bad.
Um,
So, I mean, what is it? Shit.
yeah,
I
same.
was speaking with the RFG Goblin from
Mhm.
Twitter the other week about kind of a little bit about this subject, and I think the way you'd want to just build this in, like we talked about at the beginning, about kind of martial expectations and how they fit in with like the people who play them, right?
Mhm.
I bet if you sat down at a table full of gymnasts and football players, there's a very different expectation of what a marshal's able to do, right? Because they physically themselves can do it. So
Right.
they're like, oh yeah, like doing a backflip should be fine all the time. I do them constantly. That's how I move. Strafe jumping. But I also think this kind of comes into a little of our difference of like the Dungeon Master's Guide being separated from the Player's Guide, when those books should be together. As I found out, like from several rule systems, and like I've never read the 5e books because I don't run that system. I've read all the Player's Guide stuff, but I haven't read the DMG.
Mhm.
But the information is different in them, right? For characters that use skills, all that stuff's in the Player's Guide, but it's not in the DMG, which feels weird that the DMG, the Game Master has to read 2 books, and one of them's filled with 11 classes and have to know all of them in order to run, versus the player's like, well, I've looked at my 12 pages of Wizard. I'm good to go, boys. Let's magic the hell out of this place.
Right.
And it feels like if those were combined, you would have this martial caster divide be handled a little bit more simply with knowing what people are able to do. You know, if you say, hey, in my game, it is DC 15 to run across this 2-foot wide block of wood that's wet. If everybody can kind of go off that, then you can say, all right, hey, martial character pretty much auto passes that. There's no confusion, there's no question, right? But if you have, since we have these books splitting them up, we have information being kind of gate kept. You get kind of that problem of, I should make a roll happen for this because that's how the game works, right? Like if you don't know all the DCs, if you don't know all these things, we see random rolls come into play, and random rolls representing stuff that can go wrong means they're just going to happen more often to marshals because of the nature of how we perceive those characters and how the systems work. Like, and I've seen this across most of them, right? Even Vampire the Masquerade and things like that, where unless luckily for them, they kind of did their like 5-point mastery system, where it's like, hey, if you have vampire acrobatics at 4, you can do backflips off cars on the freeway, and you're like, okay, cool, I know the level I should be able to perform. And that ties in with what Eternal was saying, is competency is a huge part of how you build these games. And it feels bad that we assume marshals to some extent are incompetent until proven cool, versus casters are always cool until they do something incompetent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in my systems also, like at higher levels, marshals get cool stuff too, like tier 5, which is the highest tier ability, like flash type offensive. You basically move so fast you teleport through the whole battlefield and hit everybody at once and deal double damage because you're just that awesome. Or if you like tier 3, I think it's high impacts. High impact. Okay, I forgot. High impact something was the name of the ability, where you punch somebody so hard you don't just deal damage, you catapult him across the room, and he just with such force that he breaks the wall behind him. Right?
Yes, flash punch. Oh. Yeah.
You know, marshals needs cool stuff too. But
For sure.
yeah, we've kind of got 6 minutes beyond the limit, so I think we should be wrapping this up slowly.
Yeah. So is there any final thoughts that we want to share, or I think we're good? I think we covered pretty much, like, there's obviously more we could talk about, right? More questions that could be answered.
It'll be cool to see your system Eternal when you have something that you're willing to share. It's always fun to look over ideas and how people are working on stuff.
I'm probably about a month and a half away from sending off for patent pending for the Marshall Technician side, which would be the D20 core book. At that point, I finish up the playtest, and it's going to be put out there in the open. And I'll be looking for people to play test it, not just with me as the game master, but someone else going, hey, I've built in how to be a game master in our system. Even if you're a new game master, a lot of info on just how to do your job and what it means. So the biggest test is going to be finding someone to run the game with their table without us there. Can you do it? Or where are you confused? You know, that's probably the biggest test of any system.
Yeah, we are actually planning to do some one-shots on the stream with our different systems, so maybe we can line them up. I mean, we still haven't solidified the plans for that, but we have thrown that idea around.
I would be down. I normally never play. Like I said, I played Vampire twice. Old Dark Ages version before, like, I think V2 technically was where I started. And I played a game of Shadowrun and one of D&D, and then I had to run a game, and well, almost 20 years later, I haven't played another game as a character. So it might actually be kind of cool to test out different systems.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also a forever GM.
Same.
I feel your pain, man. But I mean, I also enjoy being a forever GM.
GM is for those who want to play, but no one else can DM, so they're stuck.
Right.
To say Eternal GM is self-decided.
Okay. Well, so to close out, do you guys want to, like, just say how people can see you and talk to you and chat with you and all that? Eternal,
Sure.
GIF.
Go for it.
So I don't know the best way to do it, but like we are on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, and Guilded. So we're pretty much everywhere. We're working on getting the artwork synced up, but I can definitely pass all of our links, like our whole link block over.
Mhm.
Make it easier if anyone wants to come check it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Jeff. You can easily find me on Twitter on Big Campaign Podcast. That's where we're pretty active, besides in Discords and whatnot, where you'll see me wander around the internet. So easy to reach. Feel free to BS. And
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then I'll go ahead and get started on closing the stream. It was fun. See you all next time, whenever that
Bye,
is.
everybody.
Bye.